Hi, I'm Nat.
And I'm Guy. And Vladimir Putin and Donald Trump meeting in Alaska. We're going to go over all the details. Is it good? Is it good? Is it bad? The European Union might think it's ugly.
We more like you, but yes. You know a lot more about that than I do.
Okay, well, we did get 10,000 subscribers on our Spanish channel. So you're going to have, what kind of show are you going to have tonight?
I'm going to do a little bit. I mostly are going to do a question and answer. So if you do want to go ask a question, if you speak Spanish, you can go ask it on our Instagram, on our stories. And then I can answer some in English as well.
And we can probably answer them here if you put them in the chat. But
yes.
Let's get right into the top story. It just finished up. I was watching it live. I had been waiting like most people all week for this meeting to kind of happen.
Sorry, I'm trying to figure out if the microphones were on.
So perhaps she has an article, perhaps she doesn't, but...
This?
Anything.
Okay. There we go. So Nick Sortor says, this is how you negotiate. Trump forced Putin and his motorcade to drive past a huge lineup of F-22s and attack helicopters on his way to the meeting, immediately after buzzing Putin's head with a B-2 stealth bomber.
Yeah, so before the meeting actually took place and they had a press conference afterwards, I was just trying to grab a bunch of stories in case the press conference didn't happen before we went live on the air. So it was actually a very warm greeting. Putin and Trump looked very friendly. They got off the plane. They each exited their own planes. They met in the middle. They shook hands. They smiled. When Putin met Obama, they were very straight-faced. They didn't like each other. It was not the best meeting. Same thing when it happened with Biden. Did I say Obama first?
Yes.
Okay. Well, why don't you go into some of this? You can talk something.
Should we watch it?
Yeah, whatever you want.
What do you mean?
You're going to have to talk too. I can't do all the talking.
I know. But you know about this topic more than I do.
Well, you watched the press conference as well.
No, I didn't.
I told you it was on.
I tried to find it. We can't have the sound, but...
Okay, so they're both in the presidential limo here, and this was rather surprising because after they got off the plane, they shook hands. Putin got in Trump's limo, and then they drove, and he had a show of military force. Right before they got in the limo, while they were walking down to the limo, there was a flyby by a B-2 bomber. So... it was definitely a show of force on Trump's part, but it kind of set the tone for the meeting. It seemed to be a rather productive meeting. The mainstream media is panicking. I'm sure the EU wants to throw a monkey wrench in this, but you have to realize Russia and the U.S., especially the conservative U.S., are natural allies. I would say the progressives and the Democrats are natural allies with the Chinese. Why? Because the ideologies of Democrats or progressives, if you play it out long enough, it is a communist social ideology that's underlying. With the conservatives, it's more of a Russian traditional conservative ideology. That's why you'd see the Democrats always having close alliances with China. That's how China got brought up. You're seeing Trump really have the same enemies that Putin does. What do I mean by that? They both see the EU as the enemy. So they've kind of set it up where the U.S. is going to win in any situation, meaning Putin said they had an agreement. Trump said there was no deal yet. Obviously, there's an agreement behind the scenes. Trump said he has to call the EU and Zelensky to see if they want to agree to that. There's a few details they still need to work out. But this basically, Trump has already agreed to sell unlimited weapons to the EU if they want to continue the war. It's basically going to be their war from here on in if they want to take it. The EU has rejected that, said they don't want to buy any weapons. They can't afford them. That's not on the table. They expect the U.S. to continue to fund this war. The U.S. is basically going to hand it to them now and said, I got a deal. You can either take this deal or you can buy our weapons. If the EU buys the weapons, continues the war, Russia doesn't mind this because they're in complete control of the war, even if the EU does bring unlimited weapons into here. So basically, this will break the financial back of the EU. They can't afford military weaponry to fight this war. If they get loans for it, basically Trump is going to own the EU in the new economic future of digital currency. Right now, there's a war going on between the US and the EU for which digital currency and financial system is going to kind of take over next. So leveraging this war, and I think Putin doesn't mind a couple extra months of war. He'll completely own the Donbass by the end of this. The war has swung heavily in favor of the Russians over the last year. The Ukrainians are just getting destroyed on the battlefield. That being said, if the EU doesn't want to continue the war, then they're going to be forced into taking this agreement. Either way, it's a win-win for Trump, the U.S., and it looks like they talked a lot of other business agreements in this meeting, most likely. The United States and Russia are natural allies. The U.S. needs a lot of things Russia has. Russia is the major manufacturer of small nuclear facilities. This is how China got so strong and why their energy sector can actually supply their AI needs, while the U.S. can't right now. So the U.S. Could really establish itself as the world power again if they started aligning with Russia more.
So when I asked you, because I was looking for articles for the show, and the latest ones that I could find were saying like, oh, they didn't reach any deal, making it sound like it didn't go as well.
They reached an agreement, not a deal. Mm-hmm. So an agreement is him and Trump have agreed to some things. They wouldn't say what that was at the press conference. Trump said we're very close to a deal. There's a couple sticking points. Directly after the press conference, he's going to call Zelensky and the EU. I had said right from the beginning, Russia just wants the Donbass. And they basically already have that. So they're going to offer Trump a deal because they don't want Western Ukraine. That turns into an Afghanistan and an endless war situation for them. So he's going to offer Trump a pretty good deal. Trump's going to give it to the EU. The EU does not want that deal whatsoever. So they're most likely going to reject it. They need a war to reset their economy and send their citizens off to war because their citizens are extremely unhappy with the EU leadership right now. And they also need to reset their digital currency. They're going into this age of digital currency, and they need a war to make that kind of happen.
And if they don't reach a deal with the EU, then what happens? Then the U.S. just removes itself from the whole thing?
I think Trump's going to go meet with Putin in Moscow. They're going to come out of that meeting and said, we've reached a deal. The EU and Zelensky don't want it. This isn't my war. I'm no longer going to go forward with this. That's my expectation. That's what I kind of thought would happen, is the EU and Zelensky will reject no matter whatever offer is on the table here. But it looks like, man, Putin and Trump were good buddies. Putin even said to Trump and at the press conference that the war would have never started if Trump had been president at the time. What are you looking for?
I have to check if the stream is working, because I don't know if it is.
I already have it running here, so yeah, it is. Okay. What was I saying again? Why don't you continue?
That after the meeting, Trump said something about.
Oh, and then at the end of the press conference, I watch a ton of Vladimir Putin press conferences because what he says is usually what he does. So he's kind of like an open book. If he says something, he's usually going to do it. He usually justifies everything he's going to do in legal context because he used to be a lawyer, and he really follows international laws and norms. The reason he was able to invade Ukraine was because of what the U.S. did in Iraq 1, Iraq 2, and Afghanistan. So he used that legal context in order to invade Ukraine with international norms without breaking international law. But at the end of the press conference, he did thank Trump in English, and he did said, we'll have the next meeting in Moscow. I've never, ever heard Vladimir Putin speak English. I knew he could speak English. He speaks a lot of languages, but in the public eye, he only speaks Russian. It's kind of political power move, yeah. Not to speak outside of the native Russian tongue, because he's speaking to a native Russian audience typically. But it was good to see that. They had good relations. They smiled at each other when they met. They smiled at each other during the press conference. Overall, I think they both have the same enemy, and I think that is the EU. And whether this war continues or it stops, it's a win-win for both countries here. And there's one more thing I want to stay here. Biden pushed Russia and China together, and that was naturally not a normal relationship. There had recently been a spy from China that defected to Russia with a bunch of secret documents showing the CCP was planning to fund and try to help the the Russian Communist Party within Russia to succeed Putin if Putin did lose the Ukrainian war. So that being said, that put a huge rift between and a lot of tension between the Chinese-Russian relationship. Russia ended up giving back that defector to China. I'm expecting that his life was probably taken when he was given back to China. But that being said, that would put a huge rift in that relationship. And Russia does have the opportunity to kind of realign itself with the U.S. without betraying China. So.
And then you also had a video of Bret Baier with President Trump. I don't know what it is about.
Yeah, this was before the Putin meeting on the way to Alaska, I believe. So why don't we play this?
In 1986, Reagan walks away from Reykjavik with Gorbachev, and it was a strong moment. I mean, you could foresee if it goes down a bad path, you get up and walk away.
I'm not doing it based on history, based on anything else. I'm doing it based on a deal. If we make a deal, great. If I see that there's no hope of making a deal, I'm out of there. It's over. I'm out of there. This isn't my war. This is Biden's war. This is Biden screwed this up, just like he did with Afghanistan with that horrible retreat and the way he did it.
And you see how he's saying this isn't my war. I'll be out of there. Basically, what you have to think happened is he didn't leave. He seemed to be happy. They said they were close to agreement. He was going to pitch that to the EU. He's already kind of set this up as this isn't my war. If the EU wants to continue it, we'll sell you the weapons. We're a part of NATO, but we're not going to fund it, and we're not going to send our soldiers over there. And I think him and Putin kind of have an agreement, because even if they do give them those weapons are only going to degrade the EU to the point where they can't financially support them, and the United States will take full control over the EU through the financial sector after that. And I think Putin ultimately wants that. He doesn't want an enemy on their border. He would rather have Trump finance the EU with the U.S. weapons, bankrupt them so they're no longer a threat, and then Trump would have complete control over that region.
I'll never forget it. That was the most embarrassing day in the history of our country. Well, this is Biden's war, too. This is a war that should have never happened. I saw it for 4 years. It didn't happen. And I understand Putin. It was the apple of his eye. Ukraine was the apple of his eye. There was no way he was going to move on it. I'll tell you, you have a very similar thing with President Xi of China and Taiwan. But I don't believe there's any way it's going to happen as long as I'm here.
Yeah,
we'll see.
Okay, you can stop that. And Putin did say today the war, he literally said on stage the war would have never happened if Trump was in office rather than Biden. Biden pushed that war with the globalists in the EU. So a very good relationship from the two. I'm very hopeful, because no matter what happens at this point, I don't think the U.S. is very invested in this. I think he's more invested with making deals with Russia. Of any country in the world that can benefit the U.S. the most, it is Russia, with their amount of natural resources. If there was an alignment between the U.S. and Russia, it would be a golden age for the world.
And you want to watch that last video of them at the conference?
Yeah. And this was this was the press conference they gave after. Putin actually went over the history of Russia and the United States and how they fought World War II together, how they've always been close allies. And Putin went on for a while, but Trump just spoke for a couple minutes and put everything plainly and just spoke off the cuff.
Which is rare for him to speak for just a few minutes. He loves the sound of his own voice.
And let's pay attention to Putin at the end, where he does speak English. And that's the first time I've ever seen him speak English in public.
So just to put it very quickly, I'm going to start making a few phone calls and tell them what happened. But we had an extremely productive meeting, and many points were agreed to. There are just a very few that are left. Some are not that significant. One is probably the most significant. But we have a very good chance of getting there. We didn't get there, but we have a very good chance of getting there. I would like to thank President Putin and his entire team, who I know in many cases, other than that, whose faces I get to see all the time in the newspapers. You're almost as famous as the boss. but especially this one right over here.
Yes, Lavrov.
But we had some good meetings over the years, right? Good, productive meetings over the years, and we hope to have that in the future. But let's do the most productive one right now. We're going to stop really 5, 6, 7,000, thousands of people a week from being killed, and President Putin wants to.
And we're talking tens of thousands of people at this point a week dying. The Ukrainian front lines are absolutely falling apart. So he's really downplaying how many people are actually dying there right now.
See that as much as I do. So, again, Mr. President, I'd like to thank you very much. And we'll speak to you very soon and probably see you again very soon. Thank you very much, Vladimir.
Next time in Moscow.
Oh, that's an interesting one. I don't know. I'll get a little heat on that one, but I could see it possibly happening. Thank you very much, Vladimir. And thank you all. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Okay, and we clipped a little bit out of the beginning of that where Trump was talking, and yeah, but overall, very good. What came out of it was good. What was going into it was good. They don't want to necessarily finish the deal there. They're going to give it to the EU. And when Trump makes that call to the EU, he's in a position of absolute power now. You either buy the weapons from the US and continue the war, or we're out. We're no longer funding this war. We're no longer going to send US troops. The Europeans have 250,000 troops ready to be placed on the ground. So it's going to be the EU's war going forward. It's going to be them and Zelensky. They're going to lose this thing.
And Norberto Molina, hello, how are you, says, hey, it's really refreshing to watching y'all in English. So thank you for being here.
Yeah, sorry if you don't agree with all the opinions. I know my opinions of U.S.-Russian relations are a lot different than a lot of other people. I think they're natural allies, and there has been a lot of neocon and deep state influence to turn Russia into the villain over the last decades.
And I think a lot of those, specifically Democrats or very liberal people, are very against Russia, but they have been cozying up more and more to China. And I personally see China as more of a threat than Russia at the moment.
During the Biden administration, it almost seemed like they were just trying to transition power over to China, and that was going to be the end of the U.S. Now Trump has got in there. There's an actual chance, and if there's an alignment between Russia and the U.S., this would be huge. Why do I think they're natural allies? Because I think they have a natural culture that is very, very similar. Orthodox Christianity absolutely dominates within Russia, and it creates certain moral values and standards that are very similar to Christianity within the West. Also, the societies are very similar. Russia is no longer communist. It's a federation, and it is a multicultural federation. So there is a ton of diversity within the country. So the countries naturally have a lot of similarities to each other. I also think it's very easy to villainize Russia, because if there was no sanctions on Russia, it would become much more powerful than it is right now, because at the level of natural resources that it has.
Well, and except, well, for the dictatorial tendencies for the last few years, but...
Oh, I wouldn't say last few years. Since Putin's been in there, he's been very popular, not just within his own country, but polling amongst the world. He's the most popular world leader that exists today. And this is primarily in the global south. If you listen to Western polls, yes, in Western countries, he's not popular because of the level of propaganda. But in the global south, when I used to talk to Indians and Chinese people, they absolutely love him. When I used to work with Africans as well, yeah, he's very well received on a world basis because he is so calm, well-mannered, and he justifies everything he does through legal means because he used to be a lawyer. So he understands that. He understands the value of explaining things and explaining his actions. The problem is the West very often doesn't play his press conferences or his justifications for things.
Do you want to see how CNN is covering this?
Oh, all I've been watching nothing but mainstream media since this thing went off, and they're trying... Like, the EU is going to try to have to hamper this deal. So is Ukraine. The deep state is in overdrive right now. All mainstream media is trying to pitch this thing as a disaster. But anytime Trump and Putin were together, it seemed like it was a good thing. And everything that came out of their mouth seemed like it was a good thing.
Yeah, they're saying Trump-Putin summit ends without concrete deal. No deal until there's a deal. U.S. Donald Trump.
They're not talking about the agreement that was reached. So there was an agreement. And that's the issue. Vladimir Putin directly said there was an agreement. He said he hopes the deep state and the EU doesn't put a monkey wrench into their agreement. Trump said there wasn't a deal, but there was an agreement. And there was no questions allowed after the press conferences. Both men left, and all the media outlets were like, "What's in this agreement?" They don't know, and now they're just trying to go to the fact there is no deal.
Yeah, and key details unclear. Ukraine on the outside, and so Trump said he was going to call Zelensky now, after.
Yeah, he's calling Zelensky and the EU right now, and they want to set up another meeting between Russia and Ukraine. If he can get the EU and Zelensky to agree to this stuff, I don't think they're going to agree to it. So I think the war is going to go on for a few more months. Russia is going to hit Ukraine extremely hard on the battlefield, and then Trump and Putin will meet again, and then the same deal will be re-offered to Zelensky and the EU. And at that point, after there is a complete frontline collapse, they're going to kind of either be forced into that deal or forced to buy hundreds of billions of dollars worth of weapons from the United States, which would absolutely bankrupt the globalists within the EU. And that would be in Putin's best interest and the United States' best interest. So... okay, I really took this as a win-win situation for both Putin and for Trump. So the only people that lost in this is primarily the EU. I wouldn't even say the Ukrainian people lost in this, because it's really up to Zelensky if he can even take the deal.
Because for this whole war, you have been, I've watched you looking at maps and the war maps and the updates for it since it started.
Yeah, the first 2 years I started with 3 to 5 hours a day of war mapping and analysis on a daily basis, Monday through Friday. I would listen to it at work and I would download the stuff. As it approached the third year, I knew everything kind of about it. I started listening to about an hour of the day. Even now, I either watch an hour of war mapping and analysis just to keep up because I'm so invested in it. Yeah, this thing is a wrap for Russia. The big thing is Trump needs to bankrupt the EU. And the best way to do that is get them to invest in U.S. weaponry and have them take over this war completely. And even if they do take over the war completely with full U.S. weaponry, Russia's in such a power position with their alliances with China and Iran. I think the EU is not much of a threat to them.
Why were you initially so invested in it?
Oh, initially I didn't know much about it, and because I didn't know much about it, I was actually kind of pro-Ukraine. Just in my quickly educated myself. I very quickly switched my stance, maybe within 2 to 3 months in, and I understood what was going on with the history and everything else. But when the war first broke out, it was very interesting. When I was there's so much Western propaganda, pro-Ukraine propaganda, but I caught on so quickly to look like, what's Ukraine? Where's Ukraine? What's going on in Ukraine? Mm-hmm. And there was so many journalists that had gone over there from the mainstream media because they were previously villainizing Ukraine. They showed massive amounts of Nazis within the country and brigades of these people within the country. And they did 4-hour documentaries. And this was 60 Minutes, MSNBC. I'd say about 3 months into the war, all that stuff got taken off of YouTube. And they tried to pretend like that never existed. But because I was educating myself so quickly, the mainstream media didn't have a chance to censor anything at that point. So.
And then it became kind of the same story as the terrible times of 2020, where you could clearly see they were trying to give one narrative, and then the other side you couldn't even speak about, or you were a terrible, terrible person. So that makes it more interesting.
Everybody had the flag. If you said anything, you were censored online. There was major censorship on the Ukraine war in the beginning. It's eased up over time, especially since Trump has gotten into office. So. And the NGO, the amount of NGO financing, billions of dollars that went into Ukraine was insane, especially for propaganda. That has kind of waned, the money going into Ukraine, so they don't have money for the level of propaganda to sustain themselves that they used to. So now people are starting to kind of see the truth.
And also the involvement of the Biden Jr., there were biolabs in Ukraine at some point. I reported it. It's on our other channel years ago.
I believe there's 57 biolabs. A large portion of those were grade 3 biolabs, meaning weaponized biolabs on the border of Ukraine and Russia. A lot of these were financed by NGOs and put there by the deep state and worked by the U.S. government. So when the Democrats were in power, they were really preparing for an invasion on Russia, and they had been doing this since 2014.
And they did also the same, for example, in Somalia, where I also reported they found biolabs because they had gotten broken into, and they were also level 3. So they were placing a lot of these biolabs in a lot of war-torn or about to be war-torn areas from the U.S.
Yeah, and this is a NATO country, and they're not part of the EU either, Ukraine. So why do they have all these U.S.-funded biolabs there? Like, it doesn't seem like a safe place to put a biolab. A lot of these biolabs got taken over by the Russians as they invaded more and more regions of Ukraine, and a lot of documents have been funneled out to the media. So.
And speaking of NGOs, breaking, President Trump has dropped a bombshell by directing the Department of Justice to launch a full-scale investigation into Act Blue, the Democratic Party's powerhouse fundraising platform, over allegations of widespread election fraud and illicit foreign contributions, allegedly, I will say. But Act Blue, if you don't know, a lot of, for example, if you wanted to donate to Kamala, or you want to donate to, I almost dropped my headphones, if you wanted to donate to Kamala during her campaign, or any Democrat aligned, even not fully out there, like anything that's fully out there, then everything goes through Act Blue. When you look into, for example, where the donations are going, or once you look into websites that are supposedly for other NGOs, they all mostly funnel back to Act Blue.
Let's put it a little bit more plainly than you are. There was a big scandal, and I think this is where the investigation is really going to focus in on in the beginning before it broadens out. Once it broadens out, they're going to cast a wide net, and they're going to implicate millions upon millions of dollars from NGOs. But the reason it was brought to public attention was people were finding out that they had donated to Act Blue when they had never not only donated to Act Blue, but they had made thousands of donations. So Act Blue somebody was getting information of individual citizens and making donations on their behalf to Act Blue in the amount of thousands of times per citizen. So it was obvious that the Democratic Party was donating money to themselves through individual citizens that weren't actually donating, and the amount of citizens that stepped up and looked into this and said, I'd never donated to this in my life. And there's hundreds of thousands of dollars for individual citizens saying that they've donated. Why did they donate thousands of times through each individual citizen? Because there's a limit on how much each citizen can donate to a political campaign at a time, and it's like $2,000 or $3,000. So they just keep using the same information over and over till they get to the hundreds of thousands of dollars range.
So let's watch what Fox News says.
Meanwhile, President Trump is directing the Justice Department to investigate Act Blue. This is a Democratic donation platform, and the focus as the allegations about illegal straw donors and foreign contributions. Mark Meredith is live in Washington with more. This has been brewing for a while, Mark. What do we need to know?
Dana, for years, you're right about this, but this is a big development. The White House is directing the Attorney General to investigate the Democratic Party's top fundraising platform. It's called Act Blue, and the president says he wants to know if foreign money is being donated to the group and then utilized to sway elections. Democrats are calling this probe a dangerous abuse of power.
And with USAID out of action, and now them going out after Act Blue. So if Act Blue has to act extremely legally in the next election, meaning there's going to be a microscope on them for who's actually donating, this is going to severely hinder the Democrats' chance in the next election for sure, but maybe even the by-election.
We may be able to see what their actual numbers are and how many people actually vote for them.
Yeah.
Act Blue is an enormous operation in Democratic politics. It's raised more than $16 billion since 2004. You may have seen the text pop up from candidates saying, please donate, go to the Act Blue website. Republicans use something similar called Win Red. There was a new memo signed on Thursday directing the Attorney General to investigate if foreign nationals are using the Act Blue platform to bypass campaign finance laws. Trump wants a report out in 6 months.
And for example, I'd be okay if they investigated also Win Red. Just investigate all the places where money goes to, and let's maybe for the states try to make it even more fair, or the actual reality of what people are thinking, because it stops being a very democratic process if most of it, on both sides, is influenced by outsiders or by a lot of money.
Or insiders. So what was happening, USAID was giving billions of dollars of government money to NGOs, that those NGOs were then funneling that money into Act Blue and taking a cut for themselves. And that's how this was happening. A lot of the avenues of financing are now being cut down, so it's going to be a very interesting election.
We also see, like, once they cut off USAID and a lot of federal funding, for example, PBS, NPR, all of these other very biased sources of also information that go into the democratic process are also crumbling apart. So how...
And not even them. Act Blue would actually funnel money to a lot of independent journalists and debaters on YouTube. So it was discovered, and documents were disclosed that a lot of independent YouTube personalities on the Democratic side were getting funded by Act Blue on a monthly basis.
Do you think it happens for the other side?
No, but will it happen on those side?
I think maybe it does.
I don't think so, no. Not at this point.
Some of them.
Think about it.
Who? What am I thinking about?
It was a natural, organic thing, the way independent media rallied around Trump against globalists in the Democratic Party. We're part of that example. I don't get any money. I know a lot of other independent creators, they don't get money. So even if people are getting money, it wouldn't make sense, because it's just too much of a liability to start funding creators like that if it does get discovered. You already have this independent network kind of emerging organically.
And we saw it with what happened with Lauren Chen, even just like the allegations that came out and how bad that went down. So.
Yeah, no, I mean, we literally moved from Canada to Mexico. We've been Trump supporters. I'll call him out when he does stuff wrong, and we're still waiting on the Epstein files. We've seen Pam Bondi there. We haven't forgot Miss Pam. We want to see that, especially before the midterms, because it could severely hurt you with especially more moderate voters.
Yes.
Okay.
And speaking of Trump still, hold on. Breaking, Trump is now bulldozing homeless encampments in D.C. as part of his whole tirade to make D.C. safer. What do you call it when the government makes the homeless even more homeless? Says Hustle BITCH.
Podcast, what we're watching right now is, I guess, a bulldozer or an earth mover or a device that is moving things in Washington, D.C. Okay, you got a little ambient noise right there. The homeless encampments are coming down. President Trump is serious about this. He's going to take the homeless encampments down. He's flooded the zone with troops and also park rangers and others, Border Patrol. Judge Janine actually indicted a guy yesterday. He's in the process of indicting a guy for a felony for throwing a sub sandwich at a Customs and Border guy and calling him a fascist right in his face. President Trump said no more spitting on him. Those days are over. President Trump's finished playing games. He's going to clean out Washington, D.C., and then he's going to get the graffiti off the buildings.
And that's good. And I've kind of spoken, I don't mind the idea of this. I just don't like the implementation of this. Why don't I like the implementation? Because he's setting up through a federal police force, which he can then expand into other states. If you coordinate that with a digital ID as well, it's really a consolidation of power. And I don't mind that necessarily when it's with Trump, but I wouldn't like it if the Republicans lost and the Democrats, somebody like Biden, got back in there. They would completely divert away from homeless encampments and things like this to God knows what, maybe hate speech, maybe this. They would be going after a completely different group of people. So if you don't want that kind of consolidation of power to really be brought into effect to be used against you potentially one day, you might not want to consolidate it yourself. It's just a slippery slope, and I do understand that right now things are looking great for the Conservative Party in the United States, but I come from Canada, and in Canada it was a guaranteed victory for the conservatives there, and that fell apart. We're starting to see a divide within MAGA between Steve Bannon and J.D. Vance, who will be the future of the conservative MAGA movement. It's kind of going along Israel-Palestine lines, America first, non-America first. So it's going to be very interesting. But with that rift happening, if the vote is kind of split and somebody like a Gavin Newsom or a moderate can kind of get in there and reformat themselves, or just a halfway decent candidate for the Democratic Party, it could fall apart. And if they manage to lie to the American people and get back into power, Trump is really consolidating a lot of federal government power, and the Democrats can use that when they get in there.
And that's what a lot of people, I'd say, especially on the left, or at least from what I saw in Canada, don't think in the future what could happen. And it's also happening here in Mexico with a lot of censorship laws or laws that could just grasp power. I don't think they ever feel like they're going to lose that power, but if they do, then they've set it up perfectly for whoever comes next. And believe me, no matter how much people say, oh, I'm not gonna, use or abuse that power, it ends up happening anyways because the system's set up already.
Well, let's talk a little bit about these moves that are going on. This is Washington, D.C. This is a federal district, so Trump has complete control over it. It's not an actual individual state. So this is a power move because this is a Democratic-controlled stronghold. That's kind of what he wants to federalize it. But if he moves this federal force outside of D.C., it could have major implications long-term if the Democrats ever do get back in power. So I understand why Trump's doing it. It's also, it's not just to clean up homelessness. He's using that as the pretext to kind of dismantle the swamp the best he can, or at least one aspect of it. That being said, I would have liked to see local police be empowered, be funded, rather than having a federal police force that can be expanded and turned in on the American public for other reasons other than homelessness.
Mm-hmm. And also the whole notion of kind of forcing people to either go to treatment or go to jail is also not a great idea if you think about it for more than 5 seconds.
Yeah, and the issue with that is if you force people into treatment facilities or homeless shelters, but then there's a prerequisite what they have to sign off when they get there, which almost all these kinds of places do, saying you have to submit to jibby jabs, or you have to have this code of conduct, or do this. More stripping health freedoms. It would be very concerning because you would have a chance to implement some kind of MAID program as well.
And again, we're coming from Canada. One of the reasons I wanted to move out was because of the homelessness issue and the fact that all the parks were taken over. Taking the dog out to walk was almost impossible without, stepping on a needle or seeing someone ODing on the street. So I understand, and I'd even suggested and thought about, why don't they just put them all in treatment or put them all into, a mental health facility?
Also, if you strip a homeless person of their freedoms, even though if they get violent, then you have the right to do it, and that's the point. You should be able to do it. But if they set the pretext with being able to strip people or force people into these decisions, and not have freedom of will, freedom of movement, it sets the precedent to broaden that out into other groups in society later on, and possibly even the entire citizenry of the U.S. So you have to be very careful when you do strip freedoms, or you give freedoms up in the name of curing homelessness or protecting people from a virus, things like this.
Mm-hmm. And hold on, Shield777 says, what is known about what Trump and Putin have said?
Yeah, it was nothing yet. When Putin took the stage, he said there was an agreement. Trump said the deal is not finalized, but as soon as he's off stage, he's going to call Zelensky and the EU. There's still a few things that need to be worked out. Trump is trying to hand that off to the EU. So if they want to fight the war, that's their war. That will absolutely bankrupt the EU and put Trump in control over the globalist, which would be good. Everything seemed to go good. Trump and Putin were smiling, shaking hands. Putin even got into his limo. There was good camaraderie between all the negotiators. Before, when Obama and Putin had met, there's pictures. They were ice cold in their facial expressions. Putin and Biden also didn't get along. So even after the negotiations and they came out on stage, there was a big camaraderie between Trump and Putin. Putin even said, thank you, and let's have the next meeting in Moscow, and he said that in English. I watch a lot of Putin press conferences. He's never spoke English, so that was a major sign of respect. I think the Russia and the United States are natural allies, and going forward, there will be a business relationship once they get past this war. And Trump understands befriending Russia will give them strength to fight China if they need to, or at least negotiate a lot harder with China.
Or at least help separate them a little bit, because again, as you said, Biden and before pushed them together, which is not a good idea.
Well, also, China's buying up all of Russia's resources. That's their plan for the future. They're completely committed into Russia. So if Russia doesn't necessarily have to betray China to weaken China, the U.S. can come in and say, well, we want to buy a bunch of your minerals and we want to buy a bunch of your oil. And then even if the United States doesn't need it, they can kind of resell it. And that will limit the amount that can kind of go into China, because Russia can only mine and give so much oil up at a time. Mm-hmm. So Russia would be put in a position to look like they're befriending both people and not being anybody's enemy.
And Hello Walker says, if I were Trump, I'd say I'd trade Venezuela for the territory you have in Ukraine. Nah, I was just joking. Sorry.
I also think Putin's almost conquered the Donbass. He's slow rolling this because he does want a negotiated deal. He does not want Western Ukraine. That would turn into an Afghanistan forever war situation. With even if he did conquer the land, there would be guerrilla armies and everything always fighting. Eastern Ukraine's all Russian-speaking people, so it's easy to kind of bring it in as part of Russia. So I fully expect Putin gave a pretty good deal to Trump, so Trump can take that to the EU. The EU will either reject that, or they'll be forced into buying hundreds of billions of dollars of weapons from the United States, which would then bankrupt them and put Trump in the best financial situation going into the digital currency age. Right now, the big three players are the BRICS, the EU, and the US. But the US and the EU are direct competitors when it comes to their digital currency.
Okay. And now going to Crazy Canada, and a story you found from Mario Celaya. Breaking, this is the mother of all betrayals, and it's insane. Canadian Blood Services is providing Canadian donated plasma to Grifols. Yes, Grifols, a foreign-owned entity to be then sold for a profit. Our generous donation is given to a foreign entity to profit off of Canadians.
Yeah,
in addition,
this is nothing new. They're taking taxpayer dollars and giving billions of dollars to Ukraine when Canada is currently crumbling. And they've done this to transgendered Storytime. Hundreds of billions of dollars going into that from Canadian taxpayers.
In addition, Brookfield has been attempting to acquire this company, further enriching Mark Carney in the process. Brookfield Asset Management is the company that Mark Carney used to oversee. It's Mark Carney's company, the current Prime Minister of Canada, and it moved very interestingly right before he got elected as Prime Minister, so he wouldn't have to declare it or,
They're
help the Canadian
literally
people.
selling the plasma and blood of Canadians to make a profit off of them. If you think these people aren't globalist devils, I don't know what to tell you.
Hold on, I'm stuck.
And this is a regular YouTuber or Xer that I watch. He's a very, what do you say? He's a very good resource. The Canadian government's currently coming after him and trying to silence him.
Give me 30 seconds. I'm going to blow your mind. Have you guys ever donated blood to the Canadian Blood Services? Well, I was today years old when I found out that the Canadian Blood Services here is using your Canadian donated blood to be utilized by this company that then resells it for a profit. This might honestly be one of the biggest scandals of the year. Free and donated Canadian blood, scratch that, it's plasma, is being resold for a profit. You get nothing. In fact, members of Parliament of the Conservative Party just wrote a scathing letter, and it gets better. It says that the Globe and Mail reported exactly what I just showed you, and despite a 2022 pledge from the Canadian Blood Services that plasma collected from Canadians would be sold offshore. That pledge was made by the CEO back in 2022. And this is where it gets interesting. Equally as troubling is the fact that Brookfield Asset Management has been working to acquire that company, Grifols, for over the past year. Brookfield made a multi-billion-dollar takeover bid for the company in late 2024 and was again to be reported in contact with shareholders regarding an acquisition in April 2025. Even if no acquisition has been made to date, this pattern signals Brookfield's ongoing desire to take control of a firm profiting from Canadian blood donations. Given Mark Carney's significant
Okay. What I was going to say about that is you have to remember Canada mandated jibby jabs and everything else. You had passports. It was an extremely authoritarian country. They're offering the MAID program to veterans that are getting depressed, to homeless people on the street. The MAID program is medical assisted and
medical assistance in passing away.
That being said, I could definitely see, and they have had crazy programs in the past that would be kind of the equivalent to forcing people to donate their blood by declaring a national emergency. Imagine if they did that, but they were selling the blood and the plasma to other countries. Step one is to secure the buyer for it. Step two would declare a national emergency and make a bunch of money off of it. Not money that's going back to the Canadian government so they can secure resources for the Canadian people, but for Brookfield management and Mark Carney themselves.
And also, I mean, a lot of that donated Canadian blood, if it's been donated in the past 5 years, is also jibby jabbed. So I don't know how useful that blood is. And it was something that I would think about sometimes of the Canadian healthcare system. If something were ever to happen to me over there, I would always think, I mean, most of the blood is tainted in a way in Canada, and I don't want it.
A lot of blood banks in the U.S. and around the world now actually on the questionnaire asked if you had a jibby jab vaccine. If you have, you're not qualified to actually give blood anymore, which is strange.
I was never qualified because I'm not heavy enough to do so. I did try once, but they couldn't get mine.
I was watching about the shroud that was on Jesus, and they did testing on it.
Shroud of Talmud
or
something
whatever.
like that?
Yeah, where his images on it. It's AB blood on that shroud.
What does that mean?
Well, we were just talking about blood. I just kind of want to bring it up because it was an interesting fact I learned the other day. It was actually on the leading expert who has a full size replica. This thing's huge, actually. I didn't realize. He was interviewed by The Confessionals, which is a podcast. It was very interesting.
Is that your alien podcast?
That's the alien podcast, but he's going more into scientists and stuff these days. So,
because aliens are very scientific.
well, the government came out and said interdimensional beings are real. They just can't discuss it yet and declassify it.
Which government?
The girl was on Joe Rogan the other day, and she's a senator. And she,
we also have, here in Mexico, we have a crazy senator that also says aliens exist, and he brought proof. If there's any Mexicans out there, you know what I'm talking about.
Just because you don't believe in portals.
No, I don't believe in anything of that.
The moon's also
nature.
hollow, and you laughed at her the other day when she was saying that.
Oh, that was it?
No, that's a whole other rabbit hole that you don't know about, or
I
you're
do know
unwilling
about
to
it because
accept.
you yell about it. You talk about it all the time.
The science on the moon is undeniable. This thing is hollow. It seems to be made out of metal.
I thought it was made out of cheese.
Okay, let's just keep going here.
More crazy Canadian news from Global News. Is now the time to overhaul Canada's old age security? Why some argue yes.
This is craziness,
So they
and
wanna call
the comments online are all saying the same things, that you're sending all of our money to overseas projects, yet you're trying to defund Social Security from older people.
Especially in Canada, and I've talked about Mexico's depopulation as well, but in Canada, the number of old age people is growing with each year that passes, and the people that are able to, or not just able to, but that paid into the damn thing keeps growing as well.
Well, and they're giving a bunch of money to refugees that come over there that are legal.
Yeah,
they're giving them tens of thousands of dollars every year. If you just stop giving those refugees money, number one, they'll probably stop coming. But number two, then you can directly have funding for senior citizens. Let's read that article. And remember, this is definitely propaganda. The Canadian government's trying to put this out there now because they want to defund Social Security or severely limit it.
Are you trying to listen to me better? Ahead of the 2025 federal budget to be released this fall, some are raising a question that could be a third whale in Canadian politics. Is it time to reform the old age security program? The founder of Generation Squeeze, which is a charitable think and change tank with a mandate to champion general fairness, is urging the federal government to do just that and change up the retirement benefit, the cost of which is expected to soar over the coming decades. OAS is the single largest growing part of the federal budget, and part of that reflects large subsidies for retirees with combined household incomes of 180,000 Canadian dollars. The 42 billion government deficit in 2025 was projected in the last fall economic statement and is now to be much higher because of tax cuts and new NATO promises. Whose fault is that?
Yeah, Canada is pledging billions of dollars to NATO. They've pledged billions upon billions of dollars to Ukraine. They would rather fight wars than fund their senior citizens and run their country in an appropriate manner. Well, I don't care if you're for or against the war, but if it's going to cost you the security of your citizens, this is absolutely insane.
You could spend our OAS money differently right now and achieve other goals without having to raise taxes, which are already sky high. And you could do so, for instance, by asking more financially secure retirees to take slightly less. Generation Squeeze, which I'm guessing it's people that are trying to go against, like boomers and that generation, the generation that got squeezed, which is Gen X and millennials and a little bit of Gen Z. Made the case in the group submission to the budget consultation process. That's where the federal government takes input recommendations, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, there's a massive divide within older people and younger people within Canada. This was very relevant during the election. All old people wanted to protect their home price, so they voted Liberal. I don't think that's going to necessarily work out for them. But that being said, even the comments from conservatives online are like, no, we do not want to defund Social Security for old people in any way, shape, or form, even the most upper class. Canadians want to start spending Canadian money on Canadians and Canadian projects, not international bullshit.
Effing.
Whether it's transgendered story hours or useless NATO wars or putting up a bunch of money for NATO, Canada should not be in the European alliance.
And that is one of the main things.
And there's this big push by the media as well to say, oh, Canada should be part of the EU. We should have a vote to be as the part of the EU. Nobody wants that.
No. And I mean, there's this whole fair discussion, I will say, where, a lot of millennials, Gen Z, Gen X are saying, well, the boomers kind of ruined everything, and they did a lot of financial messing up and just messing up in the world in general, which has caused a lot of kids to, not have the same opportunities at the same time their parents even did, or their grandparents, like buying a house, having a family, being able to even have a family. And I do see that a lot in my comments in Spanish as well, for example. But I also think that the way Canada is managing its budget and its money, it's saying like, oh, look over here. Oh, we need to defund this, while also, again, trying to fund Ukraine, trying to, go all over the place with the money, except giving it to the actual Canadians.
And they're manipulating banks and housing prices constantly. They refuse to let housing prices drop. So a one-bedroom apartment in a city like Vancouver cost upwards of $1 million. The average price of a home, if their foreign investment was never allowed into the country, would be between $50,000 and $75,000. There was a recent research paper done on this. Foreign money has absolutely exploded the market. Everything's seen as an investment. Even Canadians see it as an investment because it constantly goes up. Foreigners see it as an investment because it's a place they can safely stash their money. Even if the property value goes down, at least they got their money out of the country where it was. So the real estate market absolutely needs to crash within Canada.
And also with all of this, once again, we can mention the MAID program, which I'm sure they'll start offering it to as an alternative as to what they can do with the retirees that they now cannot fund, but they're now getting sick, etc. Same as they've done and suggested that solution, which that's ending people through the government, has also been suggested when the budget cuts for the Canadian healthcare system came up and the issues with the Canadian healthcare system came up. That was an option put on the table as, oh, we can use this to, lessen the burden on the Canadian healthcare system.
Oh, no, that's not how it was put. There was an actual number put to the Canadian healthcare system through research. If they offered MAID, how much money, how many hundreds of billions of dollars it would save the Canadian government. And the Canadian government will say, well, that kind of savings. How can we say no to Indian people's lives? The Canadian government is very interested in creating problems so they can create solutions that strip people of their lives and freedoms. This is also going on in the EU with digital IDs right now. They're having this mass of illegal and legal immigration from foreign countries that are going to have a natural conflict with their moral standards and values. And now the native population wants these people gone. The EU is going to come in, say, in order to get rid of these people, we're going to need a digital ID.
In your opinion?
That's what's
Just
happening.
putting that as a precaution. Walker says, millennials ruined everything. Honestly, we're the ones who brought wokeness to what it is now. I'll say every generation since like the silent generation has been ruining things as industrialization and all of that and progress came to be the most important and thing at the forefront, forgetting about everything else in the process.
Well,
and feminism.
I don't necessarily think progress is always the worst thing. I think when you added progress to globalism, it became a very bad thing. And it made countries so they couldn't compete. Countries should always look to be self-sufficient. And if they can't be self-sufficient for those small things, they should look outside of their country. Even if it costs more for the country to do it themselves, they should do it themselves. Otherwise, you're going to give other players outside of your country a lot of strings to manipulate not only your government, but your economy. So, and I think we're seeing the transition of that with the U.S. That's why I like Trump's plan so much. Is it going to work? Is it not? I don't know. But I like the self-sufficiency he's at least attempting to bring back to the United States.
Because I do think, for example, like pre-industrialization, schooling was very different. Schooling completely changed and got ruined in the States and then got spread around the rest of the world during like the industrial era because Ford and everybody else wanted to, get more workers to know how to work in a factory.
Not only
so
that, but soldiers.
They changed schools, soldiers. Like, in my opinion, it was the Industrial Revolution, but then it's gotten worse and worse with each generation that passes. The boomers really, pivoted and completely brought in feminism and the new waves of feminism that continue to ruin everything. Then millennials with the wokeness, and now Gen Z with individualism and not caring about anybody else. And now Gen Alpha is just, their brains are fried, in my opinion.
Yeah.
If their parents don't really care to teach them how to be a human being.
Let's go over to RUMBLE now.
Already?
Yeah, you have to start your show at 8 o'clock. So you put it, you said 8 o'clock on the thing. I read it.
8:30.
No.
Oh, then I made a mistake. But it's at 8:30.
Well,
everybody knows it's at 8:30.
No, the announcement said 8 o'clock, so everybody knows it's for 8 o'clock.
What announcement?
The one on, I liked it. The one on YouTube.
Where I asked people to make a question?
Yeah, so let's just make it for 8 tonight?
Fine.
Okay.
It'll be at 8. Hold on, because the dog is choking.
We're going to head over to RUMBLE now, just because she has to start her show a little bit early tonight.
Because he's forcing me, apparently.
Yeah, she wrote an announcement on our YouTube page. That's the time it would be.
Sorry. Well, but then on Instagram I said 8:30. So
we'll start at 8.
I usually start at 8:30, but okay. So yes, see you over at RUMBLE in a few seconds.
And if you haven't liked and subscribed, please do so. We're trying to get to 500 and eventually 1,000 so we can monetize the channel.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, let's go over to RUMBLE.
Okay,
I'll head there now.
While you're doing that, the dog.